This lesson is on square roots, and a square root is essentially us asking what number times itself equals b. So here, when I have the square root of some number, say I've got the square root of 9. Well, 9 can be written as 3 squared, so the square root of 9 is 3. 3 times 3 is 9, so that's where we get that value. We cannot take the square root of a negative number, and here's why. If you take a positive number times itself, you get a positive number, b squared. If you take a negative number times itself, the two negatives will then cancel out and also give you a positive number. So it's impossible for me to take the square root of negative b squared. This is not possible. It's not a real number. Later on in our learning, we'll talk about imaginary numbers and how those work, but for now, you just know that it's not possible. No real number is what you can write. So let's try a couple of these, and then you'll have a couple to try on your own. The square root of 64 is 8 times 8, and again, you can use your calculator to help you with these. In your calculator, typically you'll put the negative or the square root sign first and then the 64 to get 8. If you have a one-line calculator, you're going to have to write the 64 and then hit the square root sign, and that should give you 8, but that's our answer here for the first one. For our second one, the square root of 1/25th, you can think about that as the square root of 1 over the square root of 25. The square root of 1 is 1 because 1 times 1 is 1. And the square root of 25 is 5 because 5 times 5 is 25. Now notice all of my answers here are going to end up being positive until I get here to my third question. So the third and the fourth question both involve a negative, but in a different way. So on my number 3 here, on my third question, negative radical 81, notice that that negative's on the outside, so that just means figure out what the square root of 81 is and then change the sign to negative. So here, if I took the square root of 81, I would get 9. Because of this negative on the outside, it says take the opposite of that, which is negative 9. Because technically the square root of 64 could be 8, or it could be negative 8. Either of those would really work. If they don't specify on the outside, most of the time we just write the primary, which is the positive value. Down to our last one here, we have the square root of negative 100. Now notice that this negative, unlike our third question, this negative is on the inside. So this would be no real number. No real numbers. Because I can't take the square root of a negative. Here are some more examples for us to go through. I suggest trying them on your own and then going through them and seeing if you got the answers right. Our first one, we have the square root of negative 121. I can't take the square root of a negative, so this is no real numbers. And I can also write empty set, meaning the set of numbers is empty. For my second one, I like questions like this because you really have a choice. I'm going to do this both ways for you so you can understand. My first choice is I can take the square root of 9 and the square root of 81. So the square root of 9 is 3. And the square root of 81 is 9. And then 3/9 reduces to 1/3 because I can divide this by 3, and divide this by 3, and I get 1/3. My other option, when I started, is I could say I'm going to go ahead and reduce 9 over 81 first because they both have a factor of 9. So I'm going to leave it in the square root. I'm going to take this divided by 9 and this divided by 9 to give me 1/9. And then break it down into the square root of 1 over the square root of 9, which is 1/3. So either way, I arrived at the same answer. I just got to them in a different way. My third is negative square root of 1. The square root of 1 is 1 because 1 times 1 is 1. The negative out front says we want the negative value. And our last one, the square root of 25, would just be 5.